dear sister Elizabeth brought him a little white linen suit that he might be properly attired for his burial. I can still see Mr. Lincoln standing next to me at the foot of that tiny grave, his shoulders hunched against that cold prairie wind, tears streaming down his face. Mr. Lincoln and I composed a poem entitled Our Little Angel, had it engraved upon a stone and placed on little Eddie's grave. But the Lord, in his grace and his mercy, why, he blessed us with another son that very same year. For in December of 1850, we welcomed our third son, William Wallace Lincoln. He was named after my brother-in-law, Dr. Wallace. Oh, oh, my Willie. He was such a bright and brilliant boy, so much like his father. Well, very soon we were blessed with our fourth and youngest son, Thomas Lincoln. He was named after Mr. Lincoln's father, a gentleman I had never met, but I was honored to have my son named after him. You see, Mr. Lincoln never got on very well with his papa. He's always said that they were never of the same minds. He could not even find it within himself to attend his father's funeral. But he honored his father nonetheless by naming his last son after him. Of course, Mr. Lincoln immediately nicknamed the boy Tad. Said the boy had such a big head and skinny legs, it reminded him of a tadpole. Oh, my Taddy. Oh, he can be difficult. I call him my troublesome sunshine. Well, we settled into a comfortable way of life there in Springfield, and as the years passed by, Mr. Lincoln, he was winning case after case. He became a very popular and famous lawyer. And he was making a name for himself all over the country, making speeches in New York and Boston and Chicago. Well, very soon some gentlemen approached him again, and this time they requested that he run for the United States Senate. Again, I was not surprised. I knew my husband was destined for greatness. Now, his opponent in that race was none other than Judge Douglas. Well, I thought the meeting of these two gentlemen would be mighty interesting. Now, the issue of that day, as it still is today, was that of slavery. Could our Union survive with that vile institution? Mr. Lincoln has always been opposed to the whole idea of slavery. He once said, if slavery wasn't wrong, then nothing was. But he never proclaimed himself an abolitionist, for that would have been politically unsound. I, on the other hand, declared that I was an abolitionist when I was just 14 years old. You see, my papa would allow me to sit in with the gentlemen after dinner as they discussed the issues of the day. And quite frequently, some of those visitors were very powerful, important men. One in particular, Senator Henry Clay. Why, many times I sat at Mr. Clay's feet as they discussed this issue of slavery. When I was just 14 years old, I looked up at my papa and I said, I am an abolitionist. I cannot find it within my conscience to own another human being. And I've held to that belief throughout my life. Well, Mr. Lincoln did not win that election, but that was providential, for he was destined for something even greater. And in May of 1860, some gentlemen approached him again, and this time they requested that he run for the presidency of the United States. Again, I was not surprised. Oh, the day we were leaving for Washington, Folks gathered from miles around at our house there in Springfield. Down at the train depot, why, the crowds begged Mr. Lincoln to make a speech, and he said only a few words. He said he would return to Springfield, to the people and to the place he loved the best. Oh, I was so excited to be going back to Washington City, and oh, I could hardly wait to see the house of the president, the executive mansion. And when I saw it, I was shocked. Why, this place was filthy. Why, there were rats running down the corridors, and I don't mean just Democrats. Why, the wallpaper peeling off the walls, the carpets threadbare. Why, there was stuffing coming out of the furniture. I approached Mr. Lincoln with the problem, and he looked round and said, I don't think the Lincolns have ever lived in a finer place, don't you? I did not. Of course, Mr. Lincoln has never had any decorating sense. Well, fortunately, the Congress allocated funds for the restoration and redecoration of the house. Hardly enough, $25,000. I worked so hard. I went all the way to New York. I bought the finest imported lace curtains, imported carpets. I even bought chandeliers from France. Why, even Mr. Lincoln said the house looked lovely. And those infernal newspapers, oh, they have never been very kind to myself or Mr. Lincoln. But one reporter wrote, Mrs. Lincoln, the First Lady, has redecorated the executive mansion in an elegant and splendid manner. However, there was a problem. You see, I have never been very good with money. And in redecorating the mansion, why, I had overspent. I did not want Mr. Lincoln to find out. There were two gentlemen here on the staff, and they showed me how I could move around some of the figures so as to hide the discrepancy. Oh, I wish I'd never met those two men. Well, there was a scandal, a congressional investigation. Oh, Mr. Lincoln was furious. He said the only thing we could do was to pay back the money out of our own funds, which we have done. $13,000. But the house does look lovely, doesn't it? Well, we decided we would have a party, sort of an open house to show off all the new decorations. I had a new dress made for the occasion by Mrs. Elizabeth Keckley of Washington. My dear Lizzie. Lizzie is a lovely lady of color. She is not only my seamstress and my hairdresser, but most of all, she is my dear friend. Oh, this dress is so lovely. It is made of a pale lavender taffeta. It's very low on the shoulders. That's the fashion. And it has a very long train. The night of the party, I wore flowers all the way from the shoulder down the skirt, and flowers in my hair, and just a simple pearl necklace. Oh, I am so proud of that dress. Well, the evening of the party, Mr. Lincoln came on up to my room to inspect me. He folded himself into a tiny chair, and then he looked from top to toe, and then he spoke. Seems like the cat has a mighty long tail tonight. Too bad some of that tail couldn't be up around her neck. Oh, I was devastated. Usually Mr. Lincoln is so kind with his compliments. But that evening, as we went on down to greet our guests, he slipped his hand into mine and he bent down very low and he whispered, "Your dress is lovely, Mrs. Lincoln. It compliments your eyes." Oh, he is so kind. That evening proved to be very difficult